Great. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Becky, Chief Executive Officer of the English Association, and I'm so pleased to be hosting tonight's session. A quick bit of info about the EA. We are a learner society and a subject association which was founded in 1906 to promote, support and defend the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education from primary and early years through to secondary and further education and beyond, and higher education, and we also cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to all our speakers for joining us this afternoon. And our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to everyone by paying their membership fees. So if you'd like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £53 to support our events, campaigning and advocacy work for a year, and you'll get access to a range of membership benefits, including online access to all our journals. Right, that's enough from me. So I'm going to hand over to the host of tonight's discussion, Susie Nicklin. Susie.
Thank you so much, Becky. So my name is Susie Nicklin, and I am the outgoing Deputy Chair of the English Association. I'm rotating off the board next week, maybe the week after next, after at least 8 years as a trustee, which has been very, very interesting for me. I've learned a huge amount. I joined the EA shortly after taking part in the REF 2014 exercise, and I took part in the REF 2021 exercise. So over the course of the last decade, I've been very involved with the Academy in various different ways and at various different levels, and it's something which I will always remember. It's been very special, and it's taught me a huge amount, and also met some lovely people along the way, so that's been great. But all my life I have been involved with books. Since I learned to read extremely young. I had a grandfather living with us at home who was a retired teacher, and he taught me to read from the Rupert the Bear strips in the Express, which definitely dates me. And so ever since then, that's pretty much all I've done. I don't think I've done anything else. So in terms of work, I started at a publishing house, and then I worked at an international literary agency. Then I was the director of English Pen. Then I was the director of literature at the British Council. And then I owned a bookshop and ran literary festivals, and now I'm a publisher. So I've done a huge range of jobs within the world of books. But the one thing that has always felt alchemical to me in the course of that career has been the act of creation itself. And it's at the core of everything we do. And I don't know about the people in this Zoom, but there are times when I have been to writers' houses to sort of try and work out, how on earth this happened, where the inspiration came from. I was at Emily Dickinson's house in North America this time last year, and trying to get my head around these absolutely unprecedented lines. I mean, nerves sit ceremonious as tombs. I mean, how did she come up with that? And trying to get my head into the place where somebody who was from the outside so small and humble ended up having this extraordinary international impact through her work. And obviously, one of the most important launch points for any writer, for almost any writer, and we've actually got somebody on this Zoom at the moment for whom it may not apply in the same way, is a good teacher. And that's what people come back to over and over again, is whether it's at primary school, whether it's at secondary level, further education, or at tertiary level, teachers have proved to be inspirational to creative writers. And it's something that I see also a lot, even beyond the academy. As you probably know, there are lots of different publishers and literary agents are setting up creative writing courses now. An old friend of mine, Rachel Joyce, I remember bumping into her in Trafalgar Square, and she was just off to her very first Faber Academy class. And, since then, she's enjoyed huge success as a published writer. So these are really important strands across very many different avenues that go towards making Britain such an important source of inspiration writers, and then for other media as well. Fiction sales were up by 7% in the UK last year. The publishing industry contributes £7 billion to Britain. I mean, it's an enormous industry. It was bigger than the combined, the publishing as a whole, and as part of the creative industries, ended up being bigger than the car industry last year. I mean, it's really, really enormous. So one of the things we see a great deal of in publishing is the germ of somebody's idea, which has come to them maybe through pleasure or through pain, ends up having this afterlife, whether it's Baby Reindeer, whether it's Alan Bates and the Post Office, but the afterlife goes on and on and on. So it seems to me that this business of creativity, this spark, is absolutely essential, both to our lives as human beings and how we choose to live our lives, and then also to the community in which we find ourselves. So that's why when Becky asked me if I wanted to edit an edition of the newsletter, I was extremely keen to make sure that it was on this subject, because to me it's so central. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I wonder if the speakers would just mind introducing themselves, that the contributors to the newsletter would just mind introducing themselves so that everybody knows who's on the call, which piece they wrote for the newsletter. So I'm gonna take you in the order that I can see you, which will not be the order that everybody else can see you. So Oz, could you go first, please?
Hello, yeah, I'm Professor Oz Hardwick from Leeds Trinity University, and mine was entitled Beyond the Academy Walls, and my piece, I won't say too much, is on the changes I've seen in higher education creative writing over the past nearly 25 years now, I suppose.
Thank you. And then the next person I can see is Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Draper. I am chair of the Secondary and Further Education Committee at the English Association, English teacher for 30 years, also before that bookseller, and worked for Oxford University Press, so I had an experience of bookselling and publishing, which informed my way of being in the English classroom as well, being very aware of the power of the publishing industry and the bookselling industry. However, the pieces that I wrote, so I wrote two. One was A-level creative writing, what remains in its aftermath, because very sadly, in my view, it died a tragic death in 2017. And then I wrote a second piece about doing creative writing, particularly focusing on actually the practical kind of manual kind of handwriting element. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Vanessa, I was gazing straight at you. You didn't know.
Sorry, okay, I didn't pick up those signs. This is quite neat because I'm part two of Elizabeth's doing creative writing piece. Actually, I'm part one. That doesn't mean it's more important. Yeah, so I was asked to just reflect on some strategies really from the classroom, but my main ethos in the last 20 years teaching A-level English and the creative writing a few years ago is really to inspire and get young people to see themselves as writers. And more recently, feeding into that is to work with the organisation Narrative 4, which is an international storytelling organisation, to connect communities, individuals, and see empathy in walking other people's shoes. So a lot of the creative writing strategies I've put in the article also tying with storytelling face to face, telling someone else's story. Okay.
And the next person I can see is Andrew McCallum.
Hi there, I'm Andrew McCallum. I'm director at the English and Media Centre. We're a charity that works with secondary English and media teachers. We largely are publishers, but we also provide CPD for teachers. We have a couple of magazines for sixth formers, E-Magazine for A-level literature and language, Media Magazine for media studies and film studies. And I wrote a piece about using nature writing in the classroom. It was based on a piece that came from an anthology that we've just published called Awe and Wonder, an EMC Anthology of Nature Writing.
Thank you. And I can see Atlas next.
Hi there. My name is Atlas Eden. I won the BBC Young Writers Award last year, and my piece for the newsletter was about how being homeschooled has informed my practice as a writer, and how and my relationship with creative writing as someone who grew up outside of the traditional school system.
Thank you. Now, I believe I have spoken with all the contributors. Becky, have I missed anybody off that you can see on this call? No,
I
great.
don't think so.
So I wanted to start by putting a question to our representatives from secondary and further education, who rather neatly in my screen are all sitting next to each other. But I've got a colleague who's just put her house on the market, and she's been sent the estate agent's details. And she came into the office yesterday absolutely horrified. I mean, really horrified, saying, what is this? What language are they writing? This is, I can't possibly, I work in publishing. I can't possibly allow my house to be advertised with this kind of prose. And I'd love to have feedback from Elizabeth and Vanessa and Andrew in particular on when you're teaching creative writing or writing of any kind in the classroom, to what extent do you feel your students see this as something that they're going to be employing every single day, like in Facebook posts, in their work or whatever? And to what extent do you think people view it as a subject at school which is divorced from the real world they find themselves in? So I'm going to ask Vanessa first. I'm going to ask Vanessa, then Elizabeth, then Andrew.
That's such an interesting question to pose. I would like to say it was the first point, but I think it's students are pretty much geared up to see any piece of writing as an exam piece. So really, the writing that we do creatively is part of their coursework portfolio on the whole. So really what you are seeing is then the value is as a grade as opposed to something in the real world. Having said that, I'm really pleased to see that a lot of the syllabus is for A-level, for language and literature, and language particularly, they do have to analyse text and also create their own journalistic piece. So in that sense, they have got a connection with the writing outside the classroom. So that works very well, but we've got to divorce the idea they're moving from GCSE, analysing unseen text, and then getting to see themselves as serious writers published in different publications. So yes, that's my experience.
Thank you. How about you, Elizabeth?
I mean, I would agree with quite a lot of what Vanessa has said. However, as the teacher, you intervene, don't you? And you suggest and you guide and you inspire and you demonstrate how creative writing or original writing can lead to other things and can be self-fulfilling and all of that. And certainly within a GCSE context, for example, I always have found the original writing, creative writing opportunity as a complete kind of groundbreaker in terms of forging relationships with the students, because if you give them free rein initially, which you tend to with some guidance, with prompts and things, they will reveal aspects of their lives to you, and through that they will discover themselves how interesting writing is, because it helps them formulate their own thinking, express their own ideas, find their own voice, and then you pick that up with them, and then with some of them you can nurture and develop that with them throughout your teaching time. And certainly as well with A-level, in the A-level literature, I think it is, you can do the recreative piece. So they can take Rebecca, for Daphne du Maurier, for example, and then rewrite in the voice of Rebecca. And through that again, but it's guided, very much guided by the framework of the novel, obviously, and the stylistic features of the writer. But through that, they can find themselves getting under the skin of creative writing, but using their own kind of engagement with it, which they find very exciting and inspiring. But sadly, the instrumentality does tend to dictate these days, but it's up to the teacher really to try and sabotage that.
That's a good quote. Andrew, how about you?
I'd agree with what's been said. I think your estate agents, they're probably using AI to write their text right now, certainly in large numbers. Students continue to love creative writing, and it's one of the few things you can really engage them with very, very easily. I think that, as Elizabeth used the word instrumentalization, and what's happened in schools is the pressures to kind of teach in particular ways and to kind of prove certain things mean that often it's a back to front logic of teaching. You give students the things they have to do in their writing, and then they have to start writing, rather than start with some writing with a prompt or an inspiration or an image, etc., and then work on crafting it and learn that way. It's the other way around. So they're often given a model, let's say, of a piece of writing, and they almost replicate it, just sort of shifting it around a bit, or they have to put in certain kinds of sentence types in their writing or do X, Y, and Z. And so the focus is on the minutiae rather than the effect of the whole piece. So there are real problems in schools. It's not afforded much space. The A level has been alluded to already, so losing that was terrible. But there's less and less of it throughout school, and there are less and less, there are fewer and fewer teachers, it seems, using creative writing as a way to respond to literary text, for example, critical creative writing. There's much more of a focus now on kind of critical essays as the default response. And again, they're incredibly tightly taught. So effectively, you end up as a teacher with 25 very similar essays because you've modeled every paragraph and every student's written every paragraph. You can't actually tell what the students can do because they're replicating what you've asked them to do. You get a very tight spread where the top end can't fly and the lower end are artificially boosted. So yeah, in summary, students love it. It's not going quite as well as it should do.
Atlas, how does that sound to you? How does that differ from your experience in finding your voice?
It is really interesting hearing about kind of the current state of things and the different, the way that students can take to it, but how the structure can potentially not make room for as much self-expression. I kind of, because I haven't really spent much time within the structure, I kind of just only really had guesses of like what it's like or what my parents' experience of it in their day in terms of in relation to creative writing. In relation to my own experience, because like it is more free, has been more free form a lot of the time. And a lot of the, I was thinking about how, how it kind of stopped because my education wasn't geared my mother is a writer, but my education wasn't geared specifically towards writing initially. It was covering lots of different subjects. But when I kind of started to have an interest in creative writing and take to it, it was really sort of done mostly for fun in my own time, and then like just sort of as a way of putting down different ideas and going to my fantasy worlds, and in a very kind of playful way, and then coming to this place of looking at what I was writing and then reading this like the book that I was enjoying and going, there's kind of a disparity here in the style and the quality. And so ultimately learning about the practical aspects of writing and the structure that holds it together sort of became like wanting, that sort of came afterwards and has been an ongoing thing of wanting to refine it and understand how to do it well. But I think I am fortunate in the way that it started with a sort of creative drive and has carried on from there.
Well, it certainly had very good results. If you haven't read Atlas's winning story from last year, I highly recommend. It was The Wordsmith, is that right? Did I get that right? Yeah, The Wordsmith is absolutely brilliant. I'm going to pick up on something you said about reading, and I'm going to ask Oz next to talk to us about this. I've got a friend who is a teacher of creative writing, and she was asked by her students to talk to them about books, and she picked a particular book, and they all said, no, we don't want to read that. That's absolutely boring. So we'd rather read. Anyway, after a long discussion, they came up with a different text. And she came back to class the next week, so full of ideas for questions she was going to ask them, and nobody had read it. And I saw her the day after this, and she just said, I'm in despair, actually, because they rejected the text I wanted. They picked their own. I said, fine, I changed the whole thing around so that we'd be teaching this book, and nobody'd read it. And she said to me, she just gazed at me and she said, why didn't they read it? And I just thought I might put that question to Oz to begin with.
Oof, that's a big question. Why didn't they read it? What age group are we talking about here?
Second year at university.
Right, yeah. It is
I don't want to give any more details because I don't want to.
No, I won't ask. Yeah, it is that weird thing. Why would someone sign up for a course if they don't want to read a book in the first place? My own experience is we start off with extremes, that we do get people who don't want to read a book, largely because they've never really had to. And it is this idea that came up already. Elizabeth mentioned it first, I think, of you read and you write for a particular thing rather than for doing it itself. So I think and at the same time, we also get the students who, you're asking what their favorite books are, and it could be of the current genre of the moment, or someone will say, oh, Dante's Commedia, and it's easy to think, wow, brilliant, good, off we go. So we get students of a very diverse range of reading enthusiasms and experiences when we start at Leeds Trinity. By the second year, though, we're normally sort of on top of this because everyone, all their peers, have got them excited about it. And I think it is partly that allowing the students to do the work with each other of sharing that enthusiasm, which of course very few are used to as a general principle when they start, that they have that responsibility. But on the whole, I find by the middle of the second year, it's rare that we get a whole bunch who haven't read something. And also, because my responsibility now is mainly in creative writing, I got the job a long time ago as a lecturer in medieval literature. But there is that sort of symbiosis of reading and writing that we start right from the start, not in terms of reproduce this, and it's very much sort of what you described, Atlas, that idea of here's people who have been writing and we're looking together at, okay, how's someone else doing this? And so it is part of that, I invite my students into the conversation when they turn up, rather than I'm necessarily going to teach them things. And so all that reading, the writing, the exchanging enthusiasms, the following up, if someone says something that I've never read, I will do my best to read it, and we'll bring that in as well, along with the central things. So I think it is that sort of take those tiny sparks of enthusiasm for whatever it may be and bring them in. And it might be that someone wants to be an estate agent later on and they love estate agent language, who knows? But it is that... But I've had, I can actually remember of two very good students who both went on to be estate agents. But it's also that, okay, let's have a look at the sort of language there, like you're saying, and what's interesting about it, and what might we do with it. And we might end up writing sort of parodic, or again, as Elizabeth was saying, you're rewriting whatever it is, but in the style of a recipe or something, just to think about registers and voices and so on. So the first thing we do in the first week of our first year is we will look at texts of different kinds and swap them around and think about how you move them around. So and then they start, oh, I quite like the beginning of that you gave us. I'll go off and read that book. And we're all excited together.
Great. It's certainly something that I've noticed when I started Indigo. I came from running a bookshop, so I owned it for 4 years. So I did all the buying, acquired all the stock, boxed up all the returns and sent them back to the publishers. So I thought I had a handle on what people wanted to read. And then I think the thing that's most surprised me about running this publishing house, which is borne out by the data actually, is that there's a big surge in reading among younger people. And we find that our readers tend to be aged between about 25 and 45, but they're skewing younger and younger, and people are loving print books. You know, it's definitely having a resurgence. Audio is having a big moment as well, because it's so easy to listen to a book while you're doing something else. But the next preferred format is print, and it's really coming back at the moment. And I think it does seem to me that what I'm really hoping anyway is that the more people read, the more they'll be encouraged to understand that you can find your own voice and register with whatever you do, you know, whether you're a doctor, whether you're maybe not so much if you're a lawyer, but whatever work it is that you're undertaking, you can then use your innate creativity, which everybody's got, to communicate to whomever you need to communicate.
I've just written the blurb for a back of the second novel by a lawyer. So
Right. Good. Well, who's publishing that?
International authors, sort of small experimental fiction press.
Right, very interesting. And to what extent, and I think I'm going to ask everybody this question briefly, and then I'm going to turn over to everybody to ask each other questions, and which I will monitor if people will remember to put a hand up on the screen to ask their question. But a very, very quick question is, how many people that you have been involved with have wanted to become a published author with a book on a shelf, and how many have become it, if you see what I mean? So since you've got your mic on, Oz, I'll start with you, but just a rough, you don't have to give me exact details, but I'd be interested to know roughly.
Well, I'll say dozens and dozens and dozens into 3 figures certainly have wanted to. In terms of those that have become so, probably that are regularly publishing, and that could be from, there's a number with small presses and some with Simon Schuster and so on. I'd say probably about half in the end.
Half out of hundreds?
Over 100, I'd say, not
so
hundreds.
So that means more than 50, maybe.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic.
But lots of them with small presses, but they're happy to do that because it's the doing it and the getting work out and sharing it. 2 of them run small presses now, and it's great. You know, we have a real we have small student numbers and they're focused, and by about a third go on to do the MA, and nearly all of them are publishing things by the time they've done that.
Well, that is one of the most cheering things I've heard in ages. That's fantastic. Thank you. That's very cheerful. How about you, Elizabeth?
Well, I feel a total failure, you know. I'm scratching my head here. I mean, I've been teaching in sixth form colleges and colleges of further education over all these years, but there's no kind of published, as in established published author that has come through that I'm aware of. But obviously they leave me when they're 18 years old or 16, 17 years old. I mean, clearly there have been students I have taught who I have facilitated to become published within the context of a magazine, a journal, or as with Vanessa, the Literature and Action Project, we did the quarantines with the English Association. So I'm an enabler to encourage students to become published, but I don't know of any kind of, so that's that.
And Vanessa?
Dramatic pause. Yeah, so I mean, Elizabeth has reminded me actually, the quarantines offered young people, particularly that 16 to 18 age bracket, a really great opportunity to see themselves as published writers and undergo the whole process of editing, workshopping. But like Elizabeth, after 18, it's cruel, but they don't tend to get back in contact with you. So you have this lovely close relationship for 2 years. But one thing I have seen, a note of optimism, not through English A-level, but the last couple of years, I've been delivering the EPQ, the extended project, and it's been brilliant to see students, particularly scientists who don't study literature, interested in creative writing, creating a portfolio of work, undertaking lots of reading before they sort of shape and form. So I'm got ideas for next year to think about targeting people who may not, to offer that opportunity to create a portfolio of writing. Yes, it's part of an assessment, but it actually lets them do a much longer piece of work. I had a student, her work went off yesterday, brilliant, 7 chapters of an opening novel, really wanted to write from, she's from Nigeria originally, from an African feminist perspective. So she was able to make contact with writers she'd never heard of and create her own work. And it was brilliant to see the process of somebody going through that. So I think extended project beyond A-level for our age group is an opportunity for maybe encourage them. But it's about connections, and I always make, in terms of employability as an English teacher, our department are very good at making aware of what you can do with an English degree. So publishing, being a writer, the whole process as an industry. But yes, so hopefully.
Fingers crossed. Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Andrew?
I mean, taught 11 to 18-year-olds for 15 years, and you do lose track. But there are a couple that I'm very proud to have set on the way, and certainly one you think school can have an influence. So I taught one Guardian journalist who, when she was in year 10, we won the School Newspaper of the Year award, and she was part of that. And we had it as the prize. We got picked up by a limo and taken to the Daily Telegraph offices in Canary Wharf and wrote a piece for them. And then I just saw her name in the paper 15 years afterwards. I thought, wow, maybe it was partly to do with that. There are definitely others who will have been published, but the one I can not lay claim to, he did it totally independently of me. But I taught Akala
Right, yeah.
2 years, who's obviously written his own book of nonfiction and now writes children's literature as well. And again, it's interesting to think back about what he was like in the classroom. And he was just a brilliant student in terms of his voice. So I'm proud that I think I encouraged a classroom where you could have your voice heard, and his voice was certainly heard. I think he'd have gone on to do what he does regardless of me, possibly regardless of the school. But you do just sort of, it was definitely the kind of school that encouraged debate and encouraged thinking. So you think, well, but with both of those, maybe the school had a little push towards them doing what they ended up doing.
That's fantastic. Becky, where's Becky? It'd be really great, wouldn't it, to make a note of some of these names, because I'm sure these are people we'd love them to write like a short piece saying how inspirational and fabulous their teachers are. Andrew, oh, sorry, you've got your hand up before I go to Atlas.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick response to just to pick up the point that's been made a couple of times there, that these people come to me at 18, they are adults, and more of them tend to stay in touch, and so many say, oh, I had this teacher who was, and it was outside the curriculum, but they were really encouraging, and it does make that huge difference to have someone, generally a teacher, could be a parent or something, or a carer, who has supported them, which has given them that impetus to come to us in the first place.
Super. So Atlas, I know that you've obviously published something already because I've read it. Do you see this as a really important part of your life's trajectory to keep getting that imprimatur, or is the writing more important?
It's been I feel like it's been quite a significant part of my life. I mean, these teenage years essentially, because I kind of entered my first. I mean, I have found writing competitions and young writing prizes have been quite important and allowed me to grow as a writer and to kind of step into this world because I entered my first writing competition. That wasn't one with a publication, but I won my first competition age 13. And sort of that kind of, which was tied to a local writing festival. And that sort of got me going and has got me entering things and has allowed me to be published in like short story anthologies from these different awards and to be kind of like championed in quite an amazing way. So that has been an amazing experience and to feel already connected to that world. And has made the feeling of ultimately like publishing, like going into publishing novels and that side of things, which is what I ultimately want to explore, has made it less intimidating.
Great, thank you. So now, what about our participants? These are the names that I can see on the screen, so apologies. Maybe you don't want me to read out the names actually, so I'll leave you to say your names if you want me to, but has anybody got any questions for our panelists, or have our panelists got questions for each other? I think, Becky, we've got about 10 minutes left, is that correct? Yeah, exactly. So please pop your hand up and then hopefully I'll see it and then I'll call upon you if there's anything you'd like to ask, any statement you'd like to make, anything you'd like to contribute, anything you'd like to say about the English Association, about, yeah.
I can ask a question, Susie, if there's space for it, because I know that I'm normally just fade into the background in these things, but it struck me as I was listening to you all talking that we're all using the phrase "finding your voice" as we're talking about using our pens or our keyboards. But of course, at the moment, we're all thinking a lot about oracy, speaking and listening, whatever word we want to use for it. And I just wondered if there was anything we could say about the relationship between finding your voice with your pen or finding your voice, your speaking voice. How are they related? Do you feel like they come hand in hand, or are they quite separate? Or yes, that's not a very well formed question, but just one from ignorance and interest, really.
Okay, so Andrew. Andrew and then Oz.
It's a really interesting thing to think about. So the English and Media Centre, I'm sure the English Association as well, is really keen on lots of talk in the classroom. We're quite, not sceptical is the wrong word, but we're a little bit anxious about oracy. The word itself is really a kind of politic word to get speaking and listening back in the classroom. It has intimations of quite formal teaching of how to speak rather than using talk in the classroom. So in terms of finding your voice, you're definitely not doing an oracy approach, speaking a particular way. If it's a spoken voice, I think talk is absolutely related to thinking, clarity of thinking, the generation of ideas, taking your ideas in unusual, different directions, all of which are absolutely key to creative writing. I think your actual voice as a writer is probably, though, developed through writing and having the opportunity to do that without too much intervention, or to, as Oz was saying earlier, parody, borrow from, draw on, recreate different voices so that you kind of find your own. And finding your voice as a writer is quite difficult, isn't it? And some kinds of writing actually require you to subjugate your voice, I guess. You might become a professional writer of genre fiction where you're not that keen on having particularly distinctive voice. You just want to get the stuff out that sells. So it's all fascinating, and I think they're linked, but not in too precise a way.
Interesting. Oz, how about you?
First off, and it's something that someone picked me up on a couple of years ago, and I think about it quite a lot, and it's that idea of finding your voice I'm not tremendously keen on. and more sort of shaping your voice, because you don't, you rub it against other voices to shape it rather than finding one, I think. And I think it's interesting to think of it in those terms. But also, with regards to your initial question, they are related, but I think it can be very, very, very different. I have a lot of neurodiverse students who are much more articulate in writing than they are when asked to speak aloud. People whose voices are much more authoritative, confident, clear, willing to take risks both with what they're expressing about their own lives and with what they're imagining, that on a screen or on paper they absolutely fly, whereas in a room we'll all be kind of awkward together. And I think that's kind of interesting that they are related, but in a very shifting relationships. And you'll also find people that will take you on a, I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired, so I'll get into talent show speak, but will take you on a journey with their spoken word, and they write it down, and it takes a lot of work to get it as good on the page as it is coming out of their mouth. So I think they're related, but they can be very distant relations, and their relationship between these two aspects can be a constant learning area, I think.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to move things on a bit, if that's okay, in the kind of little bit of time we've got left. Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, because I just wanted to address the sort of urgency, as I see it, and we probably all agree, of bringing creative writing back into the English curriculum, particularly in the face of AI, all of that stuff, and in recognition of providing students with that opportunity to be very messy, because creative writing is a messy business, and it's a personal business, it's an engaging business. And yes, there are lots of things you need to learn about that, the construction of creative writing and all of that, but it provides students with that freedom and originality and using their imagination. And I just wanted, before I stopped, to reference this essay that I read, that a lot of you have seen it already. I came across it yesterday, and it's written by Joe Moran, who's professor of is it creative writing he's professor of English at Liverpool John Moores University, and he wrote this, it's called "You Are Not an Angel," in brackets, "A Letter to My Students." And it's a really fantastic piece that speaks to what I just said. And he's really talking about, the joy of creative writing and how important it is. So I've sent the link to Becky, so hopefully she'll put it in the chat. And I just wondered what other people thought about because at the minute creative writing is so marginalised.
I'm sorry, what was the exact question, Elizabeth? I lost exactly what.
Okay, just a general response to the position of creative writing currently, and is that appropriate given the future, the 21st century, what the pressures that young people are facing with technology, with artificial intelligence, and the fact that creative writing is very much in the margins of the English curriculum, the GCSE and the A-level. Do we agree that that is a good thing, or do we think that facing everything that we're facing and the challenges that young people are facing, creative writing is even more urgently important in the English curriculum?
Are you answering that question, Andrew? I can see your hand.
I'm happy to have I'm sure Elizabeth knows the answers, but I think it's really, really important. And actually, there are all kinds of really good reasons to push it at policy level. One being, there's an absolute crisis in recruitment of English teachers. And that's because there's an absolute crisis of students taking up English at university level. And that's because there's an absolute crisis of them doing it at A level. And the figures at A level, the amount they drop by is what universities drop by. So the answer is A level, get them at A level, we'll keep them, we'll get them into universities, we'll get them in classrooms. I'm convinced students would do a creative writing A level where they won't do an English literature one, or a combined literature and creative writing A-level. What a fantastic thing to do. You know, I'd sign up to that in a flash were I a student, again, rather than have to just do the quite dry at times English literature A-level. So I think actually there's a strong case for the very future of the subject being tied to getting creative writing really, really prominently there in schools. And it does link to the whole AI agenda as well, that authenticity in writing and in voice. It comes through in creative writing way better than in other forms. Doesn't have to be fiction, obviously. Could be all kinds of writing.
I'm going to ask Oz to give us his point, and then I'm afraid we have to go. So after Oz, if there's anybody desperate to say something, please tell me now or forever hold your peace.
Picking up on what Andrew was saying, it's about being a human being, and it's about that. And I've got this next to me that's from a workshop, an absolute mess of bits of typing with writing over it and so on, that I did in a workshop that I went to for someone. And it's about getting messy with things, and you can do that. You can do that in connection with all sorts of things. We're just doing something involved with plant health and communities, looking at the plants in their area and creatively responding to them. It brings you into contact with the rest of the living world, which is what we need with this sort of existential threat from AI and everything. And it's absolutely vital, and it connects with everything else.
Great. That's a good note to end on. So, Becky, thank you for convening this. And thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to all of our audience. And thank you very much again for your contribution towards the newsletter. That was much appreciated. And we hope to see everybody at the AGM, which is on Saturday, the 27th, 28th?
25th.
Saturday, the 25th of May at Senate House. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.